The augmented worker. How XR can grant superpower to any employee. We're talking about teleportation, we're talking about X-ray vision, we're talking about foresight, we're talking about infinite knowledge, and we're talking about telepathy. Show of hands. Who in the room wants to have one of these superpowers? Okay, not everybody wants some, okay, but who already has one of these superpowers? Oh, okay, we have a couple of superheroes in the room. I need to catch you after my keynote. So, my name is Tibor Mérey, and I am a managing director and partner at BCG X. Many of you know BCG as a strategy consulting firm, but at BCG X, we build things. We have more than 3,000 engineers, data scientists, data engineers, designers, and so on and so forth that build products, capabilities, entire businesses for our clients. I have the privilege of leading our global Web3, IoT, and extended reality group, which has conducted more than 200 projects, and I'm here to share how you actually can make good use of the learnings we made. In the next 20 minutes or so, I want to focus on three things. First, I want to give you real-life examples how XR has granted superpowers to workers. Second, I want to talk about what are the success factors that you can transform your organizations and help your clients transform them with superpowers. And at the end, I'm going to leave you with 5 things you can do today as leaders to get going. So let's start with foresight, the ability to see the future. What you see here is an example of the US Air Force that uses XR technology to give visual step-by-step instructions. This means that any worker looks at a machinery, at an engine, at anything that he or she is maintaining and already sees what are the next steps that need to be done, but doing so in a hands-free way. So it's contextualized on the physical element that you need to manipulate, and you can just follow the steps as if you by magic knew what needs to happen next. This delivers huge efficiency gains. It delivers efficiency gains of more than 50%. And what you can also see, and that's almost more important, in this day and age, it also helps you deal with shortage of technicians. I think all of your organizations and your clients are dealing with the issue that it's hard to find talent. And if you go into specialized vocational work, it gets even tougher. So using that, you might not only support, obviously, the veteran that has done this for 20 plus years, but you can actually accelerate getting newcomers into productivity fast. Teleportation, the ability to be in more than one place at once. Our team at BCG has supported Lumen, a telco operator in the US that is very large in the provision of data centers, both of their own, but also for the maintenance of external data centers. And we have equipped their field service technicians with augmented reality headsets and have championed a use case which many of you know called I see what you see. Meaning that somebody in the field, it doesn't have to be the most qualified technician, can go into the data center, can go and troubleshoot the issues at hand, and remotely, a centralized, highly qualified expert can teleport him or herself onto the front lines. Supporting, troubleshooting, and reducing the need for revisits. Halving, actually, the revisit rate, which is huge. But we didn't stop there. We also included the client, the customer in this, meaning that the customer whose data center was being worked on could also teleport him or herself into the eyes of the technician on site and would see what's happening in real time, leading to a satisfaction rate of more than 90%. And this was interesting to us, Because before we were only focusing on the efficiency gains, but we suddenly identified that this could be a value add as well, driving more upsell and customer loyalty as well. X-ray vision. Some of you might have heard about a company called BrainLab XR. BrainLab XR is equipping surgeons with the ability of having an X-ray vision, meaning they can look inside the body of the patient they're operating on. Now, why does this matter? It matters because ahead of a surgery, they're creating a customized model of the organ of that specific patient. They are training the procedure on that model virtually, and they also have access to that as they are doing the procedure in vivo. Again, this is also something they open up to the patient, meaning that ahead of a surgery, the patient actually also gets much more information how the procedure is going to work, what is the specific area of the organ that is going to be manipulated, and 96% of patients say positively that they feel much better informed and feel much more positive about the procedure ahead of time. This is scaling. More than 110 locations are using this technology, and it's just clear that a surgeon equipped with this superpower is much more powerful than one without. Infinite knowledge. Who of us hasn't thought about wanting infinite knowledge? Gear Guru is a capability that we have built at BCG X, which allows exactly that. It actually combines the power of generative AI with the information of the client and presents it visually in XR. Meaning that you can, again, at the point of service, at the point where a technician or anybody is manipulating, is repairing something, can give all the information specific to the issue at hand into the field of view. And this can be multi-platform. We started out with iPhones, with phones, with tablets, but we can equally also port it to augmented reality headsets. Now, how this could look like, you see at the client in the air conditioning area, and it allows you, and this is now the demo on a phone, it allows to contextualize what are the steps to be done in order to troubleshoot a specific problem. So we integrate also capabilities such as machine vision to identify what are you looking at, what could maybe even be the issue, and it serves the solution right away. And again, the impact is tremendous. We see 50% reductions in breakdowns. We see also 20% reduction in downtime, and all of that by granting this superpower of infinite knowledge to any frontline worker. And this capability is horizontal, so you can adapt it to any kind of context, any kind of industry, and it can adapt and learn as you go. Telepathy, the ability to connect mind to mind or mind to machine. Harpak Ulma is a producer of packaging machines. So anything you need to pack, they can, you need to produce, they can pack. Now, what they deploy is a solution that, again, allows you to immediately, almost through telepathy, connect to the issue at hand, and it identifies the state of the machinery that you're looking at. This means that you can do the maintenance much faster, and it also builds an AI that understands the issue at hand, again, giving solutions. What you can see is that we see 80% faster complex tool rebuild. That means when they have to rebuild one of these tools, it's 80% faster and with much less mistakes. So these were now 5 examples across these different superpowers. And if you put them together, and this is not something in the far future, these are all examples live and running as we speak. This morning, actually, although I live in Vienna, I had to fly in from Switzerland because I was on the shop floor in Switzerland where a team of mine is doing multiple of these things on a shop floor setting. So if you combine all of this, you get the augmented worker. The augmented worker is 30% more efficient than any other worker. He or she is 50% faster trained, so 50% faster up and productive than a regular one. That worker can deliver a 20% higher equipment uptime and a 40 to 50% reduction in human error. If I go back to that shop floor I was on this morning, one of the things that strikes me every time is when you go really deep into the actual tasks workers are doing, you would be surprised how little time they actually spend on work and how much time they spend on reading stuff, looking for information, documenting things, going through paper lists, even in this day and age. So by tackling those non-productive areas, as well as the productive ones, you get to 40 to 50% less error, and you get to the 30% higher first-time fix rate. And this is just the beginning. If you just combine everything that's going on out there, just imagine how these powers will augment. So which areas are these superpowers worth applying to today? We talk, and again at BCG we love 2x2s, so I can't give a presentation without one. We love to look at the horizontal axis in terms of the physicality of the work. So how much of the work is actually connected to the physical world? And on the vertical axis, we look at the value. So what is the value add of the specific task at hand? Now, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff happening on the left-hand side. There's a lot of stuff happening in white-collar, knowledge-type worker that do not touch the physical world so much. And to be honest, that's not so much where we see XR as an access device adding so much value today. But the more physical you get in terms of your work, and the more value your work has, the more it makes sense to deploy these technologies today. Where is that? It is happening in the heavy machinery maintenance area. It is in other tasks where you are repairing, maintaining very expensive goods, and where that labor is very expensive, or the cost of availability or non-availability of the specific task is very high. Now, what you see, we deliberately started drawing that box a bit into the lower end as well, because as these devices get cheaper, as the generative AI capabilities get more powerful, you can apply that to more and more tasks, meaning you can also go into less value-adding areas, and you can equip broader swaths of workers as we speak. Now, you have decided you want to equip your workers with superpowers. You have decided and found an area where it makes sense. So how do you make it successful? Out of more than 200 of these transformations, we came up with the 10-20-70 rule. Of success of such transformations, only 10% rely on the data you need to connect to. Only 20% rely on the technology you choose, which hardware you select, which infrastructure it runs on, and which software do you deploy. But 70% depends on people and processes. Changing the behaviors of people on the front line, the supervisors, all the way to the top management that delivers it. So it is really crucial to over-index on that 70%. And that's something I still see many customers struggling. They are too much hung up on the 10 and the 20%. But none of my transformations has ever failed because of technology. You can get the tech to work every time. Yes, sometimes it takes a bit longer, sometimes a bit more expensive, but you get it to work every time. The 70% is where things start getting hairy. So how do you tackle the 70%? Some of you know this picture. This is called the desire path. Meaning what you see is you have the regular street, which was planned by a planner, a city planner, or an architect. But then if you look at what people actually do, is they walk or ride their bike over that newly formed path. So what do I want to say with this? In order to tackle the 70%, you really need to understand how people tick. You should not be the one sitting in the ivory tower having the grand design, the grand plan where the road should go through, and applaud yourself amongst the consultants and the managers and the experts that that's the right way the road should be built. And then you wonder why people are actually not using the road but taking the shortcut. So try to understand the real behavior, the real needs. And I will get to how you can do that as well. Now the other thing is, again, on the 10 and the 20, you should not neglect them, obviously. But one thing that I think is very important is that you take an approach that you embed it in the regular tech stack. I think we have exited now a period where there was a lot of hype in our industry, there was a lot of POCs, but the examples where these technologies have scaled were scarce. And I think the reason is that it's so dangerously easy to step up a pilot with XR. It's so dangerously cool to see that happening for the first time, but it is so dangerously difficult to actually make it scale and embed in your SAP, in your ERP system, in your CRM system, and do that at scale, because that's where it gets quite hairy as well. So it's really about having a holistic view. How do you embed in the data layer, including ERP integrations? How do you solve the data transmission? And then build a layer which can be accessed by many devices. And if I go back to the project I'm running currently, it's in the railway sector. Hopefully, maybe next year I can talk a bit more about what we did there. We actually deliberately said it needs to be a layer that gets accessed by the right device for the right use case. That means for some of the things, it's fully fine to have a 2D version on the tablet, especially if those workers already are using a tablet. For some of the tasks, especially if you're talking about an all-day, everyday use case, you don't need to have 3D XR. Maybe a so-called heads-up display, which is much more ergonomic, is more than sufficient. And these devices get more powerful. They have camera view. You can do the teleportation use case with people sharing the view. You can already do some of the machine vision use cases, and you can realize a lot of the value already. And then, for specific tasks, you might sprinkle in three-dimensional spatial computing, where you use, for example, either an augmented reality or even a mixed reality device. Although I must say, once you get to the shop floor, mixed reality is something we deprioritized for now, because the issue is once the battery cuts out, you're in the dark and it's just too expensive. It's just too dangerous. And it is really something I think we see that augmented reality is something people are looking for on that one. So integrate that, including even the dashboarding, so you can also activate the top layers. Now, how do we typically approach this from a timeline perspective? Again, I think the first parts we have been doing for quite some time. We have been starting again. You need to immerse executives in the tech. You need to immerse the shop floor in the tech very early on, because not everyone has spent hundreds of hours in these devices like many in the room have, but you need to use it in order to see it. Then we typically go really into a diagnostic, that we go very, very deep and we look into the problem. I think too often, even ourselves, we look into the solution. But you need to contemplate the problem very, very thoroughly and refrain from going into solution mode. It's tough. I mean, my wife knows. I like to get in solution mode, but you need to really understand and share the problem with the shop floor workers. Say, what is it that really kind of grinds your gears today? And only then you go into the solution mode. Then you need to validate this. You need to validate this in the here and now on the specific task, but then you also need to have that vision where you go into the future. And then we deploy iterative sprints where we are really at the same time creating the POCs to generate the buy-in and also the value, while embedding it into a broader strategy, which is also very much focusing on the 70%. So what are the 5 things I want to leave you with before I have one gift to you? The 5 things that you can do today in order to be successful are the following. Number 1, start with the business case. Always start with a business case. I tell my teams, there's no proposal, there's no presentation without starting with a business case. So what's the value you're driving? Secondly, you need to really involve the shop floor from the very beginning. That's where the 70% gets won. The 70% doesn't get won because us experts agree that this was a great presentation and the technology is great and so on and so forth. Change happens, and the 70% happens if on the shop floor they say, well, if Sue and Mary are using that, I'm also going to use it, because guess what? Sue and Mary are the most respected shop floor workers. And if they say they're using it and they like it, I'm also going to use it. So involve Sue and Mary from the very beginning and make them part of that. Test early, fail fast. Go very early out there. It can be mock-ups, it can be Figmas, it can be a first demo, put it into the hand of those users, get feedback early, and also pivot. Say, well, no, we thought it was good, let's pivot and continue. Then there's a saying, we use it not only for these kind of transformations, also for AI transformations. Create the first pearls, but move on to create a string of pearls. What do I mean by that? Yes, you need the first pearls, the first showcases that deliver value but also excite people. But you need to connect them to a string of pearls that it actually makes sense, that it's part of a bigger picture. Otherwise, you have this 100 flowers blooming, but you never get the transformation and the escalation going. And last but not least, from the very beginning, treat XR as a capability, not only from an architecture perspective, but also from a teaming perspective, how it integrates into your concepts of hiring people, training people, communicating with people, change management process, etc., in order for this to really become a capability. Now, I spoke about the string of pearls. I'm going to leave you with the first pearl, which is my personal reading list. I updated it, which people I follow, where I get the information from, and what are the devices to look out for. Thank you very much, and I think we're going to take a couple of questions. Thank you.
All right, well, I think that was an absolutely fantastic talk to end the day with. Huge number of insights there. We do have just a couple of minutes to take a couple of questions. Does anybody want to start us off?
Question over there. There's an open mic, if you like, then everybody can hear you.
Valérie, Reaps Consulting. So I'm an independent consultant in XR as well. I think I 100% agree with everything you have said, really align with everything. My only personal challenge that I would like to hand over to you is that Microsoft HoloLens just said that they would stop. Magic Leap seems to refocus on OEM business. What would be your recommendation to, and as you mentioned, sorry, see-through is mandatory for certain use case because of safety. What would be your recommendation?
I feel the same issue, because I'm on the shop floor now running transformations where we look into the roadmap. If I'm fully honest with you, we are also going to use the HoloLens too. I didn't think I would do it in 2024, but it is amongst the very few augmented reality headsets that are security certified and that you can use in a shop floor setting. So my point of view is we are a bit in this weird interregnum phase. You have still the fallout where many players have pivoted or given up, with Magic Leap not pursuing the current strategy anymore, with HoloLens being discontinued end of 2027 in terms of support. And the new ones, like all the exciting stuff like Orion and other stuff, they are too far out. So I think there are a couple of candidates. I mean, we see some of them in the expo hall over there. You can look into them. I think my conclusion was it actually forced us much more to be a bit broader in terms of looking at technology, looking a bit more at the heads-up display technology, because that is from a form factor quite okay. You have security certified. There are multiple players in this field. And then I think on the augmented reality, the true spatial ones, it is a bit of a gamble to say for 3 years you have a bit of line of sight, and then we hope that either some of the new ones come to market, or that we are able to pivot to some of the more closed ecosystems like Spectacles or some of the other players. I hope this helped.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question.
One more question.
Nick Rosa, Accenture. I have a question for you regarding the deployment at scale of VR devices. In everything that we have done, at least in Accenture, we've been facing huge challenges related to the obsolescence of the devices themselves, managed devices as a service that are difficult to put in place, both with HoloLens, with Oculus, with Pico, with any kind of devices. But on top of all the list, we've seen a lot of problems related to mobile device management. If you had like a magic wand right now, what is the top 2 or top 3 wish lists that you would ask to those companies to do in order to make our life easier?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I feel it as well. I think some of the challenges are just part of the life cycle we're in, right? It is a new technology, and if you remember, like in the mobile phone era 20 years ago, you know, it was really like almost impossible to keep using your 3 or 5-year-old phone, because suddenly it would have a camera, suddenly it would have color display, suddenly it would have other elements. Now, sometimes I don't even know if I have the latest iPhone or not, because I can't tell them apart anymore, right? So I think we're in that area to say, even if you invest now at a large-scale rollout, it will be pretty much obsolete in 2 years, 3 years down the line. So this is part of the life cycle. I think, what are the 2 wishes or the 2 ways how I think one can cope? I think, first of all, I think if I had a wish list, is that the producer of these hardwares, they need to think less of themselves as just a product company and think more as a solution provider. And they need to have that business case mindset to say, what is it, where is this kind of matrix that I showed, where am I supporting these players, and also how am I supporting them? And this is not just as simple as having a certain, let's say, device as a service or whatever. You can do that through partners as well, but also things like MDM, like device management, even to the degree how you formulate your T's and C's. I think that's one, and I think what companies can do is they should also have the business case and have this as a capability view and say this is not just a one-off thing where they buy something and they have to throw it away, but again think of it as how can this be part of a scalable business case as well. Thank you very much.
All right, Tibor Mérey, thank you so much. Big round of applause.